Hello! So if you have been following the videos in this series, you know that I'm concerned with the metaphorical nature of the Poetic Edda and the Old Norse myths. What seems like a straightforward story may hide many deeper levels of meaning. What I have not yet mentioned is that sometimes what appears very fantastic and fairy tale-like may also be a cover-up for a very straightforward tale. To cut straight to the point, I am talking about how rather down-to-earth and literal descriptions, detailed descriptions of pagan rituals are hiding within the structures of the parables that are the myths. And today I'm going to begin by revealing these structures and give a little taste of how almost all the myths of the entire Poetic Edda collection may be read as accounts of such rituals. I'm talking about one level of these myths now, and as said before, the myths may be read on several layers. And one layer, it may be read like a manual on how initiation rituals were conducted, offering a variety of examples and at the same time telling their story and how these rituals originated. So, did I say that the Poetic Edda may be read as a book? I've said so before anyway. I do not believe that the Edda was in any way a random collection of poems. I believe that the poems, whatever their origin, were placed in a sensible sequence designed to reveal the story of the great ritual of initiation that was at the heart of a genuine Norse mystery cult. And I won't beat around the bush anymore, I will just start. The first poem of the Poetic Edda is the Völuspá, the prophecy of the witch. It tells the story of our present universe from beginning to end, mentioning of course only very important events in cosmic history, things that affected the destiny of the entire cosmos. It is an introduction to all the other poems and also a summary. Everything that is mentioned in the Völuspá is repeated throughout the subsequent poems. Now, among these great cosmic events is the story of the burning of a witch called Gullveigr. Her name is derived from gull, gold or golden, and veigr, which means a strong beverage, a drink, and it may also just mean power. Gold is a metaphor for divine light and knowledge, so the name of this witch indicates what she represents, the power of divine knowledge, or else identifying her as the precious mead, indeed a golden drink, the precious mead of cosmic memory, poetry and knowledge that is so important in the myths. Now, the Völuspá tells how the witch is burned and stabbed in the Höll, the Hall of the High One, meaning the Hall of Idunn. And now, before we go on accusing Idunn of being a patriarchal witch-burning old bastard, we need to stop and look at what he and the witch represent, metaphorically. Idunn has a name that identifies him metaphorically as spirit, as poetry, as frenzy. He is the giver of breath to women and men. He is spirit, he is breath, his inspiration, poetry, passion. In short, he is life. We are all within. He is present in all of us. He is our breath and our spirit. And everything Idunn does in the myths is what spirit does, learning perpetually. He is that in us which makes us seek knowledge and new learning all the time. He is that which scrutinizes everything. He is that which wants, and wants more than anything else, to know. And from his quest of knowledge, the universe spins into a grand saga, thus the meaning of poetry in his name. His hall, my friends, is the hall of spirit, which I would say, giving an educated guess, is the world, or microcosmically each individual. What happens here is something that happens within us as individuals and also in the world at large. Now what happens? Well, in the Hall of Spirit, divine knowledge is being burned and stabbed. Now, the witch has been identified as Freyja so many times that, well, in short, she is Freyja, the goddess, in her aspect as cosmic witch and pure knowledge. And if he is the spirit that seeks knowledge, she is the soul that contains knowledge. I've been talking about her as the soul of everyone before, and there are so many reasons to say this, and one of these reasons is what Idunn and the goddess as Frigg, his wife, represent. It is said that while Idunn seeks knowledge, Frigg knows all. Perfect match, you might say. However, it is then said that Frigg, well, she speaks not, so her poor husband has to find out everything on his own. Wouldn't be any fun otherwise now, would it? So, what is going on in this hall of the spirit again? A witch is being burned and stabbed, and then she resurrects. She resurrects not only once, but 3 times, indeed, countless times, it says. She, in short, is immortal. She is the soul, and all this happens in the presence of that which wants to understand, or then breath, which is not immortal. That, I think, is the highest level of this myth. On a more literal level, let us just imagine Odin and the Aesir as a group of gods who watched a witch being burned in their hall and then watched how she conquered death as the first being in the universe to ever do so. Now, as the fussy little gods, let the goddess leave the hall eventually, realizing that nothing will kill the immortal one. They observe how she walks out into the world, now wearing a new name and a new role. She has become Seidr, the bright one, or I would say the enlightened one. And she proceeds by traveling the world, teaching all the unconventional women, the wicked ladies, how to conquer death and how to rule fate. How, in short, to perform Seidr, which is fate magic, the most powerful magic there is. She teaches witchcraft to the women and serves the community like a witch. This, I think, is a story of initiation. It follows the basic structure of a pagan shamanistic initiation ritual known to all the world, a structure that involves the symbolic death, the symbolic resurrection, and then a symbolic restoration to society with a new role, a new name, and a new profession. This is probably a description of how the initiation of a witch was perceived to happen. I don't mean to say that the poor novice witches were literally burned. The burning must be metaphorical, but that the witch experienced a sort of spiritual fire trial in the halls of the gods before she was considered ready to serve her community. The myth tells the story of how the first witch did this. And the first witch was the goddess herself, and she taught it to the women, to those women who were wicked enough to choose witchcraft rather than marriage. The fact that this story is given 2 whole stanzas in a rather short poem that describes all the most important cosmic events also shows that the theme was important to the whole cosmos, or at least to the cosmos of the religious community that created the myth. Indeed, witches, the Völur, were important women in the old Norse society, and they had been for a long time. Roman sources dating back 2000 years in so tells us how all these Germanic tribes let themselves be guided by communities of women who were well versed in spells and magic, and the influence of witches did not restrict itself to the home and heart. Germanic tribes let themselves be guided also in war and military moves by witches, by groups of women, often called the mothers of the tribe, or the seeresses. Some German tribes parted with their witches early on, namely the Goths. The Goths' ancestral story is like this in short. About 100 BC, the Goths departed from their homeland in Sweden and went across the sea into the Baltic countries. They brought with them a community of women known as the Haljoruna, and that, I think, is a Latinized version of the Norse word Helgjorun, which means the secret of Hel. Now, Hel is the underworld, or also the name of the goddess in her aspect as death. Rune means a secret, so these women knew the secrets of the goddess, or the secrets of death, or both, probably. They had influence in the Gothic society, so much influence indeed, that the king, Filimir, became a bit pissed off with them. Now, it's not the first time that the priesthood clashes with the royal powers, but this was probably the first time in Germanic history that the royal power won. The witches were accused of performing dark and evil magic and were expelled. Apparently, this female priesthood was last seen moving eastward into the Siberian steppes. The Goths experienced a great change in their religion, in which they started to worship ancestors and the king himself. The king was worshipped. Maybe that was why the witches were trying to, criticize the king or something, and maybe that is why Filimir accused them of evil magic. In any case, the Goths, without their priestesses, became king worshippers and then started to bully everyone else around them, conquering here and conquering there. However, it is not as if the expulsion of the representatives of an entire ancestral religion went unnoticed by the lay Goth. The event made a great impact on the minds of the Goths. 500 years later, a people arrived in Europe who were even greater bullies than the Goths, the Huns. And as the Mongolian Huns swept across Europe and made all the Germanic people their vassals, the Goths were convinced that this was the revenge of the Helgerunes, the witches, who must have been mating with demons to produce such a fierce tribe out there in the steppes of Siberia. We're talking about 500 years later, people. The expulsion of these witches was an event that was remembered. Now, the Goths were about the only tribe that refused the counsel of their witches. Everybody else kept witches, and when Vikings moved from Iceland to Greenland during the 10th century AD, they brought with them a group of 9 witches. The saga of Eirik the Red contains a tale regarding the last surviving member of this group of 9 witches, the Little Völva, that means the little witch. And they refer to her being the youngest of the original group. At the time the little witch appears in the saga, she has become an old woman and is the last surviving member of her group. A ritual of Seidr is being described, where the witch receives the greatest honors as she comes to the farm, and how she makes all the women on the farm, regardless of class and status, to come together and hold hands to make a circle around her. And they sing the song called Vardlokker, which means calling the spirits. And then the witch performs her divination and calls down fertility on a land that has been plagued by drought. Numerous graves have been found containing the remains of Germanic witches and priestesses. They are all very splendid, showing that these women were greatly honored for a long time, and they invariably contain 3 kinds of items: a sacred staff, a collection of magical herbs and amulets within a pouch, and the necessary items for serving mead. Yes, mead. Most of these ladies were buried with a spoon for serving mead in their hands, which goes to show, according to archaeologists, that the serving of mead was extremely important to the witch priestess profession. Now, I think this brings to mind the maiden with the mead of the Poetic Edda, and also the reference to a golden drink in the name of the first witch that I talked about earlier now. In my next video, I shall continue this subject, as I will be talking about the male initiation ritual and how witches participated in these. So, okay, bye for now.